that we had our last stream. I have been busy with work, with farming and school, and I think I haven't had the time. And I've also had one of the most interesting reads this year, and I've been really looking forward to it because it has been on my list for quite a while. And I think I've taken a week to read it religiously whenever I found the time. I think it's quite demanding to incorporate reading as well, especially with the busy schedule that we seem to be having recently. And so I wanted to start a new trend whereby I will be reviewing a book every hopefully week, depending on the size and depending on the density with which the ideas in the book are. I think today's book is quite it's a short story because it's an account of a singular day of one of the characters by the author, and the shortness or the brevity of it doesn't take away the profundity of it. I think there are a lot of deeply thought out ideas, and that's why I really think I will want to go through a few of them, and hopefully I'll maintain this under 30 minutes because I think that is the time that I have before I get back to work. So today's book is by Alexander Solzhenitsyn. It is One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich. And I think for those who have actually come across Solzhenitsyn, you will realize that he had written extensively on forced labor camps. Because I think another read that is on my list that I think I will be looking to get to is the Gulag Archipelago. And A Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich is what I was reading previously the past 1 week, and I think I've come across a lot of very, I can't say disturbing, but they will disturb you to some extent because he actually wrote exclusively from the forced camps of Stalin era, and that is why it really caught my attention because of how much similarity it has with a lot of things that I've been currently going through. And I will be saying a lot of controversial things, especially how most of our capitalistic society is designed in the most socialist way. I think there's a lot of ideas that were borrowed from the concentration camps, from the labor camps that were brought in by the British into the capitalistic design or the industrial revolution thing that they did in colonizing the Africans. I think there's a lot of things that Solzhenitsyn writes in reference to how work, how ethics that were promoted in the work, in the forced labor camps, have come to have so much similarities in the same settings that we have, especially if you have ever worked in any multinational company or any company more so brought in by the colonialist. I think recently I have had these interactions purely because my place of work is a multinational, is a British multinational. I don't want to mention the particular name because of the sensitivity that is around that, but I've realized a lot of what colonialism predicated upon were borrowed from the socialist Stalin Russia, and a lot of those practices have been gentrified, or rather have been normalized into the capitalistic systems. I think most factories, most industries that war actually brought in colonialists have had the principles of socialist Russia or the Stalin era. I think I will still maintain my reads primarily mostly to classical literature, because I find that those are the ones that have the most well thought out ideas, because of the amount of suffering that was in the previous uh, times. I think we lack that much influence, and I think there is a good relationship, however, between suffering and art and how you express yourself artfully. So today I want to go through a few things that I got from a day in the life of Denis Ivan, sorry, Denisovich. I think what stood out mostly for me is the work ethics and how despite the settings of how forced camps were treacherous, how painful the labor was, and how much you could work without being paid enough, or you could work without getting what was rightfully earned. I think uh, what is interesting with that window, I think what is interesting with what Solzhenitsyn writes, the premise of it is the fact that mostly what was going on at that time was largely inhumane, and I think to actually have written out those ideas which promoted hope, those ideas which promoted etiquette, work ethics, justice, and all other forms of ethics was quite far reached, and it showed some resilience, especially from the value of his character. I think what stood out the most was that despite the darkness of forced labor camps, they would actually prioritize work because work actually provided purpose, even in the most dire. Because in the book you can actually see the sentences where he quotes. I will read a few. He says that warm up with work, that's your own salvation. You can see that they were subjected to very treacherous situations, but the thought of work or going out to work could actually stir some hope or some purpose. And I think he actually goes on and says, "Real lockup was when you were kept back from work." So, and his main character, Ivan Denisovich, who he calls Shakov's, was going to the infirmary, but his pain was claimed to go away after he was given work, because work, he said, was the first-rate medicine for all and any illnesses. I think the book actually promotes how much work as an outlet for purpose, or as an outlet for creativity, can actually be able to cure especially desperation and especially depression. And I think it actually makes sense because there is an element of momentum, that the idea of actually being useful has on someone who's depressed. I think most people who are depressed largely because they lack purpose, mostly because they lack work. And I think if you were to actually try curing somebody out of their depression, I think the first and the most sustainable way to do that, and to give them the capacity to actually remove themselves from that position, is to give them work. I think I get the same idea from Viktor Frankl, and he talks about existential vacuum and existential crisis, which were brought about because people lacked purpose. I think work has an effect of giving you purpose. I think the first antidote that I would give to someone who is currently struggling with the question of existence is I would actually advise them to find some form of work. I think the whole point is to get your momentum going. I think we lack meaning because we lack purpose, because we lack work. I think from Solzhenitsyn's story, you can see that he actually painted the picture of how awful the circumstances they were in the forced labor, in the concentration camps. And I think mostly what he focuses on during that singular day, as he narrates the story of Ivan Denisovich, is how much respite or how much hope he garnered from or while they were in the field, because I think Ivan Denisovich was a Mason, so he actually goes on to get a lot of purpose from masonry, as compared to what he could alternatively have focused on, which was the terrible situation of being in a forced concentration camp. I also was attracted by Alexander Solzhenitsyn's idea, whereby he says resentment only comes about if you've been punished for something you don't deserve. I think that struck out. I think that struck a chord in me because of the agitation recently of the youths in my country. I think they feel that they feel resentment towards the political class, because I think they feel that they don't deserve the failed system because they are not part and parcel of the failed system. They feel like economy that is not working by the predecessors who are the cause somehow of the failed system. And I think that is why the resentment comes, because they feel that they're being punished for things that they don't deserve. So I think that's one of the things that I found very interesting from Alexander Solzhenitsyn's definition of what resentment can, or what causes resentment, because I've realized there are three, would consider them as a three triad. Oh, sorry, the triad of the evil triad, which is anger, bitterness, and resentment. I think when somebody is depressed, most of those uh, three traits are the most pronounced. So you find that there's and then there's resentment, and then there's bitterness. Those are the defining causes, or rather expressions of emotion from somebody who's depressed. I think so. The way Alexander Solzhenitsyn defines resentment actually sticks out. I think when you must, or a way to actually cure resentment is to actually know exactly why you are being punished, not necessarily whether you deserve it or not. And I think you should actually be able to clearly understand the situation that you're in. I think we, because of the confirmation bias, tend to confirm that everything that is happening, however bad or however unlucky, is always as a result of punishment, or is always subject to the causality and not correlation of factors. I think it's quite an interesting emotion. I think we are a generation that harbors most of the resentment, because a lot of things happening at the moment, especially economically, politically, and socially, because I've seen there's a fragmentation of the social, or rather the idea of socialization. I think we are living in a generation whereby most, I say men, are very lonely. I think institutions such as marriages is failing. Institutions, even purely dating or relationship, however platonic or not, seems to be failing, largely because I think the three emotions have been quite prevalent in terms of the current situation. I think anger, bitterness, and resentment. And I think I was drawn to how Solzhenitsyn defined resentment, because I think if you listen to people explaining their situation or explaining their misfortune, you find that they have always uh, claim that they are going through things that they did not cause. And I think that is where the resentment comes from. I think the generation that is quite agitated at the moment, mostly because they feel like they have been dealt the wrong hands by the wrong people. And I think, yes, some of it has the same truth, some of it has some form of truth, but I feel like for movement forward, or for progress, I think understanding what resentment is, I think understanding what causes resentment is the first place to actually solve it. I think men right now, because of the, is it the gender imbalance? I think because we live in a generation whereby most women are paid more. They have more access to resources, job opportunities, capital. They have more access to systems such as the judicial system seems to be favoring women. Uh, there's a lot of things that is structured to that. So I think men feel shortchanged, and that's why there's a lot of resentment. And this I get because I've had conversations with men, and especially men who have actually gone to the trenches, men who have actually gone to dark places, and I think men do actually go to dark places more often than women because women have more resilience in a way. I don't know why, but I think maybe that's something to look into. And so I think that is what was interesting again from a day in the life of Ivan Denisovich. I also had this idea recently. I think with the prevalent of politics and how interwoven economics, I think I have gotten this idea to actually try and understand the different forms of is it political settings or economic settings? I don't know, but they are both interdependent. So I think socialism as an idea, I think we mostly have had Karl Marx's socialism content, I might say. But I think I did not primarily have the understanding for what socialism is. I think this Alexander Solzhenitsyn's writing, and I think a few others have actually brought me to the light of curiosity as to why and what is capitalism and what is socialism. And I think I really wanted to understand because I realized that whatever causes so much controversy or whatever causes so much effect in the population is not politics per se, but politics is just an extension of what is economical. And so socialism is, I think, the vile nature of socialism was laid out by Alexander Solzhenitsyn in this book because of how much constrictions and restrictions it had in the citizens of Stalin's Russia. I think he actually says. Points at how much rules there were around the ownership of material. I think that it was against the rules for the prisoners to possess two pairs of footwear at the same time. That is a pointer to socialism. I think if I was to explain socialism to somebody else, I think socialism would mean that you actually own property as a group. That's the most reduced explanation of socialism. Uh, the antithesis to that is capitalism, which means that you are singularly the owner, or rather the proprietor of capital. Like it can be, of course, it can be owned in a social group. That's why there are cooperatives, and but I think what has been conveyed, misconveyed, if there's a word, is the fact that socialism and capitalism are two separate sides of a coin. I think they are single. I think the system functions with both. I think right now the system functions with both because capitalism only exists in business, but in politics it's more socialists, and we can see that in our country because we can see businesses deploying capital or the factors of production, which is capital, land, and labor. But this spoils are split according to socialist groups, according to politicians who have chosen themselves, and they are creating quite a havoc because it's crazy. I think they are have this idea